welcome everyone. I'm happy that you're here. I wanted to, we did not have any public requests for public comment. But I did want to share with people that one, Sal Canada has stepped down from being on the school building committee. He used to be a principal. Now he's moved back to the classroom. Jackie Glasheen is the principal supervisor. And so we do need to have the category of principal on the SBC, and she can fulfill that role. The other change is that Lori Belanger, who was the lead for procurement for the city, is no longer with the city, and that required a procurement license called MCPPO. So we will need to refill that position once she gets hired, and we've reached out to the MSBA for guidance on what to do in the meantime. Anthony used to have the license, so and Margaret does have the license, so that's good. So we're fine for now. And then I did want to introduce Margaret Wood. She'll be coming on shortly, but she's our owner's project manager, and Bob Stevens, who Bob, if you can hear me, I'm trying to promote you to panelist. You need to accept it. We'll be working with her too. They're from Answer Advisory Services. And then welcome, Bob. And then finally, I did want to say we do have interpretation through Lynette. Thank you for Ramona. It's going to be live interpretation, and it's hard to do that for 2 hours straight. So at one point we might, at a couple points, you might just need to take a break so she can catch up. So I think those are the main parts. Did anyone have any comments or questions before we move on? Okay. I am going to wait for Margaret to further introduce herself until she's on a computer so we can see her face. Mayor Garcia is supposed to tell us a little bit more about the Finance Committee presentation. So I'm going to skip that till he comes back in. And then, so I'm moving ahead to 6:30 where we had a schedule to the section, discuss and answer questions on requested documents submitted to the MSBA. It's been a really busy season for submitting stuff to the MSBA, which is great. We had a bunch of feasibility study agreement documents, which are linked there. I know that you guys were able to preview a lot of these at the July session. Did anybody have questions on the documents or what they meant? Okay, it was, yeah, so we're all caught up to speed on that, which is great. And then another big thing that we needed to do was to bring on Answer Advisory as our OPM, which we have, and we were able to procure their services. So was an important step forward for us too. And then we do need to keep the updated list of school building committee membership. We'll be working to send a new one shortly. So if anybody, I'll stop one more time. Does anyone have questions about those documents or what they mean?
I just have a comment, Erin.
Please.
I can go. Yeah, when I looked at the contract, at first I was very pleased that the maximum for the OPM came in, well below our total budget of $475,000. But I did notice the maximum was above what we have budgeted. We have a maximum of over 180,000, but we're budgeted only 169. So we would want to be careful that we try and keep that below the 169.
Yeah. If you remember, we had like a little bit of wiggle room in that total number.
Yeah.
So I don't think that it's going to be a problem.
So I realize that's the maximum, but we don't want to
numbers guy.
We don't want to hit the maximum because that would put us over budget.
Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. Good catch. And we noticed that as well. But luckily, when we went to get the 475, we knew there was a little bit of wiggle room in there, and I think that we should be fine.
I
Something to keep an
appreciate
eye.
that, David. It was, yeah, we ended up going $11,000 more than estimate, but we had that $25,000 buffer. And then, but even so, and maybe Margaret can speak more to this, like there was a lot of assumptions that it went into that. And one of the things that she's learned more recently with the designer selection process is maybe that'll be a little bit quicker. So the nice thing with the OPM is we pay them hourly. So if we don't use their services, we just don't need to pay them. And Margaret will manage to that number. But now that we officially have Margaret here on a computer, I want to go back. Margaret, welcome. It's great to see you. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about your background and especially like how we can expect to work with you as an OPM.
Okay, well, it's great to be back. And it is Mr. Collymore, good to see you again. I am looking forward to getting to know those of you that I didn't meet in the previous iteration of this project. But, you know, I think I'm also working on a project in Amherst right now. And as I've said to the folks in Amherst, you know, these projects can have a sort of long path, right? I don't consider the previous project to have failed. I consider it to have been a step towards the project that we're working on. And I am hoping very much to sort of be able to leverage, you know, what I learned before about your community and about the goals for this project, to sort of really streamline what we're doing now. So just for background, so I'm an architect by training. I worked as an architect for about 30 years, but for almost 20 years, I have worked as an owner's project manager for, I started with a company based in Boston that has now been acquired by a bigger company, but we're still the same group of people. And I'm out in Pioneer Valley a lot because my family has a place in Chesterfield, which is west of Northampton, for those of you that go up and down Route 9. So, you know, Holyoke's a very familiar place for me, and I'm hopefully going to help to answer, as part of this presentation tonight, some of the questions I'm sure you all have. I just want to say there are no dumb questions in this process. So if you ever have a question, I think Erin's probably shared my email. If you ever have a question or you want to have a sort of conversation with me, just to understand something that we haven't been able to get into enough detail in a meeting, I hope that you will make use of my contact information. So Bob's my partner in crime. So Bob, do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, just real quickly. Thanks for inviting me to this meeting. I was kind of briefly involved previously when the project involved 2 schools, so I kind of have some sense of the background. I'm an architect. I've been practicing architecture for almost 40 years in the Western Mass area. I worked for the same firm for the most part for 40 years as an architect and then as a principal. And I've been involved in a lot of public school projects, elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, renovations, additions, new schools. So I know the venue. And through about 2018, that was kind of what I was doing. And then after that, I decided, hey, I'd like to do something different. So I've been working with Margaret and Answer since 2019 now, so about 3 years. And I'm local. I live in Westfield. So that's the quick summary.
Yeah, and I also just want to say in conclusion, so I think it's a little bit confusing that Bob and I are both architects, because our role here is not to be the architect. You know, in particular here, what the owner's project manager is supposed to do is to serve as an extension of the owner. So if you're at Mount Holyoke, for instance, or UMass, you know, the colleges and universities have like a staff of people who manage projects. Most municipalities don't have someone to manage the project. So in the MSBA process, municipalities are required to hire this as a sort of consulting person. I think what's great, you know, what's valuable to you all about Bob and myself is we understand, what the architect is supposed to be doing, but we also understand the MSBA side of it, and we're the kind of the main liaison between the city, the district, the committee, and the MSBA. Because the MSBA has a preference for only or mostly interacting with one individual, because otherwise they get like lots and lots of people contacting them. It's not to stop communication, it's to channel communication.
Yeah. Thank you, Margaret. And most of you have met Margaret before. Those of you that have been on the committee for a long time, and that's just a testament to her willingness to help Holyoke. She was, even though we weren't a client of hers during that time, anytime either Aaron, or the mayor, myself had any questions, Margaret was always willing to jump in, and I appreciate that, Margaret. I don't know why they call you guys the OPMs. You're really the MVPs of this process. Aaron and I did the best we could to get this as far along as it is, but we've been waiting for you patiently to really help support us and guide us through the rest of this process. So thank you.
My pleasure. Our pleasure.
Does anybody have questions for Margaret, Bob, or about their background or what the role of the OPM is? Okay, great. They'll help us understand some important next steps, but we'll get to that in the next section. Welcome, Mayor Garcia. Do you need a couple minutes, or would you like to launch into kind of summarizing some of those key takeaways on revenue?
Hey, everybody. I'm not sure. So it wasn't the last finance committee meeting. A few finance committee meetings ago, Andrea presented to them the revenue forecast, and there's a full recording. I think Aaron had left on the agenda there, the link as well as the time frame to fast forward to, and there you'll see a robust presentation of what the different revenue sources are, and kind of gives an overall breakdown of what our budget looks like for the city using these different revenues when attempting to put together our expense budget together, what appropriate for services. Did folks see that at all? Did you guys get a chance to review that? In a nutshell, I mean, a couple of key things, and I think I've mentioned this already a few meetings ago, to look at is that there's a healthy surplus in the budget as it presently exists, and we budget conservatively, even though whatever it's all a guesstimate when you're putting your budget together. What we the guesses are conservative, specifically so that as we get updated revenue projections, or not necessarily as we collect our revenue, we collect more than what we anticipate, and that's what creates the flexibility in the budget or contributes to that surplus you're seeing. So I think right now the surplus is a little over $1 million. It feels like 1.1 million. But we anticipate that that's probably much higher than as we get closer to the end of the calendar year and setting the tax rate, and we get a new update on our revenue collection, my guess is that we're going to see that that surplus grow more than what we expect. That does not take into consideration any other new growth potential that's in the pipeline at the moment. So it's things like that make me feel confident that when we're ready, to pay that first bill when we're ready, that we'll make enough room in the budget to sustain the city's portion of the cost. Andrea, we did contract with the CPA firm with Andrea, who is right now, as we speak, putting together a 5-year forecast. So that, again, so that we can continue to project out much further than just the next fiscal year. So that, we have a better understanding, where our budget will be, in 2 years or in 3 years. Yeah, those just key takeaways. But again, anyone has any questions on that front, or if you hadn't had a chance to review that, I strongly suggest you do, because one of the biggest things we have to do out of this group is make sure that we want to keep an eye to the affordability part. Can we sustain our portion of the cost? This project obviously is very important to all of us here, especially to me. And that is why, it's important for, those that are putting the budget together, that I'm constantly thinking about this project here, so that I can fit the future costs into our operating budget. So, I try to be as mindful as possible, try to expand our trying to maximize on any new growth or revenue growth as possible, so that I can slowly but surely create that space we need to be sure that we can sustain our portion of the bill. Now, the other side of all of this is, and we got our OPM here who's going to help us understand this, and we got to be honest with this. Costs everywhere has climbed significantly. And so I'm not going to lie, because of that, I do worry that 1.5 million that we talk about covering probably isn't 1.5 million. So we just got to keep that in the back of our minds. It certainly is back of mind all the time. We just got to be sure we're doing our due diligence to try to hit target here.
So, Mayor Garcia, I actually had a brief conversation with Aaron about this earlier today. We're going to go ahead and take a look. We have all the estimates from the prior project, and just as a benchmark, I'm going to go back and look at the prior project and figure out what the escalation would be for that project, which isn't to say you're committed to it, but it will give you a flavor of how it's changed. It is true that costs have escalated quite a bit since we estimated it. So, but I think it's really important before we go too much further that we do a check on that.
Yep, thank you.
Erin Brunel, did you have a question?
Yeah, more of a, yeah, I'm here. I'm just driving. So Josh, if the city is going to see a surplus, so knowing that we don't have to start paying on the project until it's complete, could we start putting money away in the years prior that the city has a surplus to kind of start saving to ease the city's burden once it is officially structured for payment?
So we, yeah, we can do that. How much we can do, and if whether or not it's going to scratch the surface to what we need is another. Like, for example, we did create a capital stabilization account. There was some funds from previous fiscal year we were able to move in there. There's $1 million sitting in there, and I do anticipate to keep investing in that account so we can start working on some capital projects. And we can budget for this, but it's not, we're talking about, I don't know, how much are we talking about? $30 million, 40, you know what I mean? Like, we can try to defray the cost as much as possible on our end, but obviously, the most we can defray, the less we'd have to pay for annual recurring cost or annual, towards the debt.
Yeah.
So the answer is yes, we can. I just don't know how effective it will be.
Gotcha. Okay, that's fair.
But on the flip side, like I said, there's a lot of, marijuana excise tax, for example. There's been a steady incline in revenue collection from that, and it's pretty significant every year. This year alone, we had estimated collecting 800,000 max, and we budgeted potentially collecting 600,000. Right? We did an estimate budget, or conservative budget on that, and then the next year after that, it's going to be more. If we do collect 800,000, or maybe we collect more than that. And then next year, it's going to probably increase even more than there's just been this every year, the steady incline in the collection of excise taxes through marijuana. And that's a good revenue source right there to tap into. But you have the Bay State Health project, behavioral health building, anywhere between 1.2 and 1.8 million. So there's another potential. And you have, our current surplus of 1.1 million. So again, these are things that make me feel good, that I look forward to, but circumstances and situations happen, and we're working with our OPM. We might learn something we didn't know before. There's always a new surprise that I'm dealing with every single day. But we just got to stay the course, stay committed, and see where the chips fall.
Terrific. Josh, we were able to cover the next section. We did things a little bit out of order. So now we're going into this section, and I'll turn over the standard duties to you, but we're in the section understand and answer questions about next steps with MSBA. That's at 6:45 in the agenda. And the first part of that is that because of all those things that we did with the MSBA, they invited us to the facilities assessment subcommittee meeting. So there will be some board members from the MSBA there. And we have a draft presentation that we would like to run through with you so that you know what is in the presentation, and also so that you can give us feedback. A lot of this is based on what we submitted in that education program, like the ed plan, which we submitted on May 26th. And then also the board members gave us some questions back, responded in July, and it's that same group of board members that should be at a September 14th meeting. The meeting is on Zoom. It's in the morning, and we don't have like the law yet or anything, but once we do, we'll share it with you. And then it will be Mayor Garcia, Superintendent Soto, and I presenting. And I'll do screen share to start us off. Can you guys see my PowerPoint?
Yep.
Yes, okay. Thank you for nodding. So Mayor Garcia will lead us through introductions. I put on the main people just who are going to be on the call with us. And then we're going to talk about how we have our whole school building committee, though, that's been meeting monthly. And then we'll go to vision of the future, and that's Anthony's section.
Yeah, so in this section, we're just hoping to articulate to them where we're at with our rezoning efforts. I want to be able to articulate that, many years ago, we moved to a K-8 model, and that in doing so, I don't think we fully grasped the impact that was going to have academically on students and on student experience. We've talked about that here as a committee, that we had a lot of small middle schools spread out across the city, and that we're really not providing a good experience to our middle school students, partially because our grade bands are so low, and the enrollment to support a K-8 model just isn't there. So we're going to explain to them that this rezoning process is going to revert us back to the elementary, middle school model, and that's going to allow us to better prepare our students academically and socially. It's going to make sure that our schools are are more equitable in the way that we design them so that our students are better supported. It's going to ensure continuity of programming. We call out here dual language and special ed, but I think when we present to them, we're just going to talk about continuity of programming being really important in this rezoning. And we know that it's going to also allow us to be more, to allocate more resources, just be more efficient and allocate more resources away that are being spent outside of the classroom and divert them to resources that support instruction and anything that supports instruction. So that's what this slide is really aiming at, getting at. We will show them on the next slide a picture of the old PEC and possibly the new PEC. Right now, we have a building that houses 2 different schools. As many of you know, we have Holyoke Middle that serves 6 to 8 in the old PEC building, and we have PEC School that serves grades 4 to 8. And we're looking to get a new middle school that would support our rezoning efforts for up to 550 students. Since we are rezoning, one of the things that we're making sure happens during this rezoning process is that we don't wait for a new building. We want to plan. We want to make sure that we incorporate a plan that when we do get a new building, we didn't go through this whole rezoning process. That we don't have to go through this whole rezoning process again. So as we move forward in this rezoning process, we're factoring in that there's a potential to have a brand new building in the fall of 2026. And if for whatever reason we aren't able to move forward with funding for this project, we'll just use the existing building that we have, and we'll unfortunately that's just what we'll have to do. But as part of the process, we're also going to be, next year when we rezone, our plan is to move students out of the PEC facility and into another building. This next slide really tries to get at where we were last year, where we want to be in the upcoming school year, not this current school year, and then where we'll be in the fall of 2026. So you see that the column to the left is last year, the middle is where we plan to be next year, and the last column is where we want to be in 2026. Hopefully when a new middle school building is built. You can see in that first column where we were last year, we had 11 schools with 9 different grade configurations. So this slide really does detail how we're moving from a school system with too many schools, too many grade configurations, and a lot of different variation in how we're operating them to a more streamlined and purposeful school district. We highlighted in red some of the big changes that you can see in the fall of 23, for example. We plan on having 3 middle schools. That's because if we have to close down the old PEC middle school so that they can do new construction, we have to relocate those students. We are considering, as part of that process, we're considering 3 buildings that we're, you'll see later on in the presentation, we're talking about the rezoning process a little more. But the 3 middle schools in the fall of 2023 would be STEM middle school would still have to be co-located with Dean, and then we would still have to have Metcalf dual language program as a separate middle school. Once the new schools are built, once the new school is built, then those 2 middle school the STEM middle program and the dual language at Metcalf, those students can then move into the new building. And then the one where we decide for the new middle school, the other middle school to be, those kids will be able to stay there. And then in fall 2026, you can see the major changes in red there is that we hope to consolidate down from 3 middle schools to 2 middle schools. Like I said, Metcalf and STEM would then be moving into the new building. And we hope to have a new building. All right, and as I stated earlier in the previous slide, you saw that we had 9 different grade configurations last year. This year, we've been able to streamline it or standardize it a little bit better, but 2023 is going to be a real important year. We are going to bombard the community and as much as we can with opportunities to try really hard to engage the community in this process and get as much feedback as we can. I know that rezoning is really disruptive, but we hope to have an announcement in November of this school year on like what that's going to look like, and some very important decisions that will be made for the school year. Again, here you can see the color coding of like major changes to anticipate. So in the left column, you see all of our schools and the current and the grade spans that they serve in the current school year. And you can see that in the next school year, when we go to elementary, middle, and high school, our plan would be to close the Holyoke Middle School, formerly known as Veritas. And then you see there's 3 schools that we're looking at as potential to being a middle school in 2023. Those schools are Kelly School, Donahue School, and Sullivan School. They all have, like, from an infrastructure standpoint, they're all relatively the same size. They all have 33 home rooms, and they're all able to fit anywhere from 500 to 550 kids. So we are breaking that down into a couple different phases, but the first being like, we need to decide what school we want as a middle school.
I had no idea that it was that convoluted. That's crazy.
Yeah. Aaron, can you go back to that slide again? Sorry. You see in this slide in the year 23 that PEC would be closed completely. And you see in that middle slide that we are at elementary, middle, and high school. And the only thing we're waiting for is for, in the right column, the new school, which then we would reopen at the PEC site and move kids out of, like I said, Metcalf and STEM. So a lot of work has gone into it already. A lot of communication has gone out already. And we plan on having more opportunities for us to engage different stakeholders in the process, so that we get as much feedback as we can. And I will. This is just right now. This is our current zone map. You see, Metcalf's not necessarily located there because it's a district-wide dual language program, so it doesn't necessarily have a zone. But it would be over by the PEC site, kind of like southwest of it. But and then I'm going to kick it over. At this point, I would be kicking it over to Aaron so that she can go through the ed
Question for you first.
Go ahead.
Kind of personal interest, because my grandson's in the younger grade in Metcalf. Those students would go to, I guess they'd be split up depending on which of those zones they're in, or is that
potentially
it's just going to be the older kids?
Yeah,
Metcalf.
potentially it would. That is one scenario, right? Like one scenario would be for Metcalf to be a dual language middle school. And then we would have to move those elementary students to either Kelly or Ian White, depending on the scenario. We first want to decide what school.
So would they be staying together? Or would they?
That's part of we have to actually like make some decisions on that. The first decision we need to make is what's going to be the other middle school. And then there's going to be some other decisions in terms of programming, and there's going to be other decisions in terms of where the boundary lines are drawn, and what programs are going where, like, where is ABL, where is SIP, where is dual language. So a lot of those decisions will come a little later in the process, but we hope to have that wrapped up. I know, and ironed out by the end of November.
And the other thing, as far as siblings, would that be taken into consideration? So parents wouldn't have to be, running around to a couple of different schools.
Those are things that have to be discussed and decided on for sure, right? We would have to look at, as part of this process, we have to look at our existing appeal process, our existing enrollment process. So, sibling is something we've always considered, especially with, open enrollment programs that aren't just boundaries, that don't go purely based on where you live.
Still a lot of the works.
Still a lot in the works, but we're lucky enough to have done a lot of work already. And, Aaron has been amazing in helping support, and Jackie's been we've been working on this. This isn't something that we're starting now and want to finish in November.
There's so much to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Any
in a
other
couple
questions?
slides under outreach, we can go into some of that for more information. And it's linked in the agenda, David, too, if you want to look back at that. But on this page, we'll talk about the middle grades collaborative study team that convened last year. Aaron Brunel was on it with me, so was Jackie, and just how we looked at a lot of different research, did focus group surveys, and were able to really get a lot of people involved in what middle school should look like in Holyoke, and that's driving our decisions, informing our decisions for rezoning and the middle school building. The vision that we came up with, and you guys saw this presentation last year, is really straightforward, that HPS middle school students or middle schools equip students with the skills and experiences to excel academically and socially in high school and beyond. And that we looked at AMLE's 16 characteristics of effective middle schools, and these were 5 that were most important rated on the survey, that we want to make sure are present in our middle school experience, which includes active purposeful learning, multiple teaching approaches, activities inside and outside of the classroom, so that applied learning, that it's an inviting classroom environment for everybody, and that adults value adolescence. And then, so the different ways the vision and beliefs have come to life in terms of the educational plan for the middle school building project. One key way is in the schedule. One of the recommendations from that study team was to ensure readiness for Mass Core through high quality instruction and curriculum. And you'll see that the core content is 59 minutes per period. That is more than a lot of other middle schools. A lot have like 45 minutes. There's this intervention period, which I circled as well. So that's a chance for students to get the additional support that they need. It's also a chance for advisory or acceleration. And that an important part of ensuring kids have good quality content is teachers having planning time. So that will happen during the rotating enrichment block. A second recommendation was to provide exposure to enrichment opportunities and career pathways. We see that through that rotating enrichment block by quarter. It was really clear that people want to make sure kids don't just have access to like PE and art, but they also have access to music, world language beyond just the dual language program, drama, STEM, etc. So they would get 12 different exposures through their 3 years in middle school. And then that intervention and acceleration period is a time to do like school and college planning. That advisory is a really great time for like exploring different career pathways. And then also by having 2 or 3 middle schools, it's also easier to make those connections with the high school. You can have teachers or students from the high school come to middle school, or middle school go to high school. It's a little bit less coordination than what we have currently when you have middle school students at like 5 different schools. A third recommendation, I need to fix that up there, but it's a little F there. A third recommendation was to implement advisory to support social emotional development and offer those opportunities for personal and career exploration. Not only will that be in the acceleration, but also in that homeroom breakfast in the classroom period, which is like this, you know, a smaller group where students get to start their day. And then ensuring time for teacher collaboration. We're having that collaboration both in that, oh, sorry, I made a mistake. I'm going to fix this. The teacher planning happens during this rotating enrichment part. And then there's also teacher planning 4 times a week. In this case, in the morning, assuming that schools, middle schools are later start. And that so that teachers can talk about the individual needs of kids, but also plan their curriculum, see what they need to go back and reteach, etc. Lynette, are you doing okay? Do you need me to stop?
I can drink some water.
Okay, we're gonna take just a minute break. You can smile at each other. Usually there's 2 interpreters, so it's Lynette's carrying a lot of weight right now.
Go ahead. I'll let you know if I need it.
Okay,
Doing great.
like wave me down if you need more break. Another way that the middle grades collaborative study team recommendations have come to life is through the building needs. On the left, you see some of the key recommendations around, for example, ensuring enough students per each grade and school to allow for classroom and program variety, and ensuring efficient, sufficient and sustainable staffing levels. How that's manifesting itself in our building needs is that we're planning for a 500 to 550 student middle school. That is about 170 to 180 students in each grade, which means about 80 to 90 students in a house or a pod. So that supports that kind of that being known. You still have enough kids that you have variety in your school, but you're still a known student. It supports grade level teams so that people can plan with like other 6th grade teachers, but also other 6th grade math teachers and 6th, 7th, 8th grade math teachers. And it allows for at least 5 different enrichment teachers so that kids do have access to more specials. Another recommendation, sorry, was there a question?
Yeah, I do. You mentioned pods, so you're leaning toward team teaching?
Yeah, the plan would be that like in each pod, there's a language arts teacher, a math teacher, science, and social studies. So those are your 4 content, but also an English learner teacher, an inclusion special education teacher, and then also a counselor at the grade level. So that therefore that team of 6 gets to know those 90 kids really well, and then the 90 kids get to know each other.
So you covered the 4 major topics, including science?
Yep.
Okay. All right. I taught 8th grade, and we not initially, but we eventually went to team teaching, and it's superior to doing it any other way.
Yeah, that was one of the challenges of K to 8 is that wasn't happening in a lot of our schools. We had grade spans of like 40 students. So we had a teacher covering a few different content. In some cases, like the kids were just in that same room all day. They're not rotating to other teachers. So we want that's not a real middle school experience. And this is why we want to move in this direction.
Pleased to hear that. Really, that's definitely a step forward. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you for sharing that. That's really awesome to hear that it was a good experience for you.
I mean, it was the best.
We got one other question.
En la experiencia que he tenido,
In my experience,
en los 12 años que vivo aquí,
in 12 years that I've been living,
he pasado bastante tiempo en la escuela PEC en especial.
I have spent a lot of time at especially,
Y aparte que soy pastora en esta ciudad,
and also I'm a pastor in the city.
Y muchas madres me llegan con la preocupación
And many mothers come to me with this concern,
de que la escuela PEC
that PEC school,
dicen que es la escuela de los niños malos.
that it has a reputation of being the school.
Es una escuela que ha recibido demandas
And there's a school that has
por niños golpeados.
because kids have been hurt.
Tiene que ver esto con que no hay el suficiente personal para bregar con estos niños.
Does this have to do that we have lack of personnel staff in the school,
O estos problemas vienen de sus hogares,
or this problem is actually coming from their home?
ya que el superintendente habló
Because the superintendent has spoken
de involucrar la comunidad,
of involving the community.
pero cuando los padres vienen a buscar ayuda,
But when the parents come seeking for help,
no la pueden encontrar.
they can't find it.
¿Qué podemos hacer con eso?
What can we do about it?
Yeah, I think,
Real
I-
quick, Anthony,
Go ahead.
we did not pick up Lynette really well. So could you like summarize what you're answering for us?
I think, the biggest takeaway that I have is that she, all right. Has a lot of concerns around PEC, and PEC has a reputation for serving the bad kids. It has been involved in a lawsuit. I'm trying to articulate what she was saying. It has been involved in a lawsuit where students have been hurt. So she also feels that I had mentioned that we want to work together and we want to incorporate the voices of those that haven't been heard. But her experience is that when parents have had issues in the past and they've looked for help, they weren't getting it. And another point she made is like, in terms of the lawsuit and students getting hurt, is that attributed to a lack of staff at the PEC school, or is it attributed to the environment that the kids are in at home and bringing into the school? Did I capture that right? So I think those were the big points that she said. I hear you, Ramona. I can't answer the question that I don't think that there's a lack of staff at Tech. I think that when we look at staffing and we look at student demographics, we take that into consideration. I know we've had an issue with our therapeutic intervention team, but there's probably for every student in the therapeutic intervention program, there's a staff member. The ratio is almost 1-to-1 in that program. We need to do a better job supporting students with that have our struggle with mental health. It was something that we, and I say we because although this strategic plan is Holyoke Public School, it was a plan that was developed with a lot of people.
Mhm.
A lot of people articulated what you did, that we need to do a better job supporting our students. I do think that like going to this middle school model will allow our staff to be experts in that area. So we won't have, a student support team that has to support 8 different grade levels, right? We'll have a student support team that has a focus on supporting middle school students and can specialize in that. We've done a lot even this year to grow those student support teams. And I think that we had a strong week 1. Like I haven't had a week 1 like this since I've been here, for sure. And, I've talked to many principals, I've visited many schools, and it feels so much different than it did last year. But I don't, that's a tough question to answer. Like, one thing I will say is that as part of this process, we're looking at student demographic as one of our core guidelines and we don't want a school that just has all of our special needs or therapeutic intervention and then another school that we want to look at our middle schools and make sure that the demographics balance out so that both schools are great middle schools and so that we could develop staffing models to support that. It is unfortunate that there has been incidents where students got hurt. I don't think that had anything to do with staffing levels. It's just unfortunate. One of those things that happens sometimes, but thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you all. And another recommendation was students having a rigorous academic experience, and in the building design, which I'll incorporate some visuals here, I just needed another day, is like there's small group space right next to the big classroom so that if you need to pull out a small group for a little bit of time to help them on something, then they're close to the classroom so they can go back in and not miss core content, for example. There's also a learning commons and a project space so that kids can engage in hands-on learning and practice presentations too. We've talked a lot about the exposure to enrichment, and the building would have a music or band room, a stage, a design lab, a media center, and an art room. We've talked about teacher planning. There's learning commons and conference rooms. And then we talked about ensuring space for mental health and partnering with community agencies. The designs had an expanded nursing suite with a parent center and 3-room for therapists as well. So that's how some of the recommendations are manifesting itself in the physical design of the building. And then lastly, there was some recommendations that came from the team about who's in the school and how we distribute that. And so this we're approaching through rezoning. One recommendation was balance the number and needs of special populations across schools, like Anthony was talking about. We're considering 3 different scenarios, and I will say that, okay, we looked at, I think, 15 scenarios and probably like another 15 maps to align with these scenarios. The rezoning working group, I worked them hard for July and August. And we came up with 3 scenarios with 3 maps. And a driving factor was having a relatively equal demographic balance in middle school, especially based on, I put SES here, that's socioeconomic status. So economically disadvantaged, race, students with disabilities, and ELs. So I'm excited, and I hope you come to some of our meetings so that you could learn more about that. Another recommendation was developing and implementing a plan for middle schools that works with or without a new building. Like Anthony was talking about, we're planning, our rezoning approach is planning for 2026, and then we're backwards mapping from that. So we don't want to, rezoning is disruptive, and we don't want to rezone in 2023 and then rezone 3 years later. So we're planning for 2026 and then thinking about, assuming we have to vacate PEC, what does 2023 look like at 24, 25? And then lastly, a recommendation was to utilize previous middle school building work as a starting point in order to save time and money on the project. We get to use the same OPM, which is great. We refreshed the educational plan from what was submitted in 2018, but the core components of the building design still resonate. I appreciate the academics extracurricular subcommittee that helped me on that. And then we do have a desire to work with a designer or an architect to ensure that any of our proposed spaces meet a balance of specialization and flexibility. So this is a building that works in 2026 and 2075. And that it matches, that we have the right amount of space given the schedule, and that we maximize reimbursement eligibility. I know sometime the last building committee invested in some other spaces that might not have maximized reimbursement eligibility. Since it's really important that we're super duper cost conscious. That's not very professional, super duper, but very cost conscious. It'll be good for this committee to look at. Do we want, like, is there an area where we want to have less space in order to maximize reimbursement potentially? And then we also, there have been some changes in the science room guidelines that we'll need the designers' help to update our rooms with. So that's the summary of the ed plan. Does anybody have any questions or suggestions in terms of what we included in that presentation to the subcommittee? Okay. Okay, I think I'm passing it back to Anthony for the equity commitments.
Great, yeah, so actually this is good because what me and Aaron are doing right now is practicing the presentation. So
It sounds good, you guys. You're doing well.
I'm starting to see where I was probably talking too much earlier because it gets a little repetitive towards the end. So thank you guys for bearing with us, but I just want you to get a sense of like how we're going to present to them. One of the things I want to highlight here is our outreach efforts, and here as part of our the strategic planning process, and over the last 3 or 4 years, we've been really refining our equity commitments and who we want to be as a Holyoke Public Schools community. And I just want to lift one important equity commitment that we live by, is that we seek out and incorporate the voices of those impacted with a commitment to include those who have been excluded in the past. And we, you know, I am proud of the efforts that we have made to try to do just that. You know, we're a lot of the decisions that we're making, we provide ample opportunity for folks in the community to participate. And, you know, we're looking at translation, and I'm looking at Lynette right now, and I wish my grandmother, you know, my grandmother was like Ramona, and she would have needed an intern. We weren't doing that for my grandmother in the past, right? So we are living out this commitment every day, and that's how we. I want to highlight our outreach efforts. While we did a good job prior to on the last project, unfortunately the 2019 vote failed, and we needed to do more to garner more for support from local leaders and from the community based on that failed vote. Everyone knows what the results of that vote was, but so we were committed right out the gate to do more around this outreach effort. You know, as you know, we even have a subcommittee around outreach as a body here. You can see here that we've had since the failed vote, we've had the school building committee. We've met 11 times. This is since the failed vote. We've had about 7 school committee meetings where we provide the school committee update on our process. We've gone to city council, either the full or subcommittee, 6 times to talk about this. We've had joint committee meetings with the school committee and city council 4 times. We did the PEC building tours, which many of you were a part of. As part of our strategic planning, we did moving forward meetings, which we were able to really get some good feedback on the rezoning efforts and on our strategic plan. We had 5 meetings where we did the middle school grades collaborative study, which helped guide a lot of what Aaron was covering earlier, and how we developed the schedule and what we have in terms of a vision for middle school experience. And you can see here that we just want to articulate all of the efforts that we have, because we know this is like a huge deal for Holyoke. This is not a small thing. This is something that's so important to the trajectory of where we want to be and the experience that we want to see our students have. And we know that, you know, us sitting in a room making decisions without without getting input from the community and families and like all different members of the community, we know that would be very, very foolish to do so. This just really highlights all of our outreach efforts, and I'll kick it back over to Aaron. Actually, I won't kick it over to Aaron. I got another slide I have to present.
Okay.
We're getting some practice.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So early in the fall, we had a rezoning task force that met on September 12th. And we're going to be having several meetings. I talked about providing opportunities for families and community members to engage in this process. Here is a list of those. So on Wednesday, September 5th, we're gonna have a meeting at 5 p.m. at Kelly School. One of the things that I'm trying to do is be creative, because typically we have these community meetings and we don't get a lot of people to show up. So we're not only promoting this meeting, but we're promoting supervised, fun, free activities. We're partnering with the great Coach Chris over at Learn in Motion. He's agreed to help support any family member that wants to bring their children down to the events for fun activities. He incorporates learning and sports while we talk about this process. We're gonna have on September 21st, we'll have a virtual meeting. And then on Thursday, September 29th, we'll have an in-person meeting at Holyoke High. We thought Holyoke High was a great location, given it's centrally located in the city, has plenty of parking, it's well lit. At that event, I'm also trying to do something creative, like have a basketball tournament for our middle school students. I don't know if any of you have gone down to Jackson Park in South Holyoke this summer on Friday night. Ed Casey did an amazing job putting a basketball league together, and I would go down there every Friday. My son was playing in the league, and it was just a beautiful thing to watch so many parents and community members just having a great time watching kids play. So I'm hoping to do something similar to that, and then get parents to come learn about our rezoning efforts at the same time. And then again, we'll have something October 11th virtually. We're going to do a school committee retreat on a Saturday in October. And every time we meet with the school committee, we plan on providing an update, because we know that that's another way for us to get the word out about our rezoning efforts. In addition to the survey that we sent out back in August, and it'll be open until October 13th. Aaron.
No, I'm not. To David's questions earlier, we're breaking up the rezoning outreach efforts into two sections. The first section is through the end of October, and that's really focusing on which schools are going to be elementary versus middle. And then at that time, we'll also announce who the school leader is, where the dual language programming is, and then the process for reassignment of impacted staff. And then in phase 2, we will, which is happening in November and will be announced before December. That's when we're going to have conversations about the exact boundary lines. We obviously have an assumption going into here, because you had to have an assumption to be able to evaluate 3 different scenarios, but we'll show people why we think what we came to is the best, and then still have an opportunity to understand where we started and move lines if we need to. That's when our technical consultants from AppGeo will be here to help us. At that time, also, then we'll announce where the special education programming is, and to the process and timing by which any displaced students would be assigned to a different school. For example, dual language, the elementary students at Metcalf, where they would be going. We're also looking at having autism services, sub-separate autism services at more than just Donahue, so how those children will be reassigned. And then, like Anthony was talking about, having an appeals process And then also the date by which impacted staff will be notified that they're impacted, and that will be a couple weeks later. Okay, and now I'm going to pass it to Margaret to help us understand 3 different possible timelines.
Yeah, and then
Do
I'm
people
gonna,
see this okay, or do they need me to zoom in more?
It's hard to see the words, but graphically, we can see the years and the colors really well. So I think if she
Okay.
talks through it, we'll be fine.
you know, I
Okay,
think if everybody switches to a standard view, so you get the little pictures on the side, that helps. Because then it'll mostly fill up your screen.
sorry, what do you want me to do?
No, not you. You're fine. For those of us who aren't you, if you switch
Okay.
to standard view, you get a really big screen with a handful of little pictures on the right side of the screen. So, okay. So, let me say that in starting to get my head into this, and in response to questions from Aaron and others, I wanted to sort of share with you kind of the major components of the overall project, and to talk to you a little bit about places where the building committee is going to have an important role. So big picture, I started from the perspective that when this relaunch of this project started, we were definitely hoping in conversation that we could have a building open in the fall of 2026. So these kind of initial looks at this were looking at that. Now, mind you, that was assuming that some of the processes that are now behind us were going to move faster. So overall, I want to just say that that's a goal. I don't think we should be committing to it publicly, because as you will see as I get into this discussion, there's some risk. And so I laid out 3 different versions, and in each one sort of pointed to where the risk is. So in all of them, the one thing that is similar in all of them is that we're going to end up taking, and the way these schedules are done is by quarter. Hopefully that it's big enough on the screen so you can see it. So the 3rd and 4th quarter of this year are going to be committed to doing the designer procurement. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but now it's possible it could be a little faster, but I don't think for the moment we should assume that. So they're all the same on that issue. The next step that needs to happen is a revision of what's called the schematic design. So in a previous project, you had Jones Whitsitt as an architect. Now there's a commitment to the MSBA to look at the model school program, and I'll explain the detail of that. So the shortest version, if you have a designer on board by the end of the year, the shortest version of that schematic design is 3 months. And I think that's pretty aggressive. So I showed one version at the top, or that's 3 months. I think it's more likely it's going to be 6 months. So it will be, the tasks will be different depending on who the designer is, but basically you sort of revise the schematic design, you re-estimate it. Schematic design is important because the number that you establish, the value for the project that you establish in schematic design, is what is the basis of your funding agreement. So if your project cost goes up after you've signed the funding agreement with the MSBA, that change in cost is 100% on the city. So you don't want to rush through this. You want to make sure you take the time to do it. And you can see the first version has this kind of very aggressive approach. The second and third versions take a little longer. Perhaps the most important driver here is actually, and we're not going to decide this today, but one of the most important drivers here is when the local vote is going to occur. So in the first version, I played it out with the vote happening, essentially in the spring. So May, June, and the the second and third versions, I'm assuming it would be in the fall. And it says votes because there's two. So the community, and I think in this case, the city council is proposed to vote on this, and then the MSBA votes. And they can happen, like there's not a required sequence, like the city can have its vote first and then the MSBA can vote, or vice versa. But the MSBA does have a schedule of meetings. So you have to we have to figure out this piece of when the vote would happen. And then you can see, then there are some differences with how much time you spend doing the bid documents versus how much time you spend doing the construction. Now, when we did the project the first time around, we had assumed an 18th month construction schedule. And I just, I still think if the world kind of continues to sort of right itself, that's a reasonable amount of time. But one of the big things that has changed because of the pandemic is that it's become actually much more uncertain. Certain materials that are critical to the construction have become sometimes hard to find and expensive, and sometimes completely unpredictable in terms of when we'll get them. We have a project in Worcester, and this is not an uncommon issue, where the switchgear was like, oh, we found out where the school is supposed to open in the fall, and all of a sudden the switchgear wasn't going to come until December. And so that actually, the team, the design and the contractor ourselves, figured out 3 different ways to deal with it. And then the switchgear showed up. So I just want to say there's some risk in assuming that this is just an 18-month schedule, but it's I think a reasonable amount of time to talk about. I just want you to understand we will have more discussion about that. That's not a fixed date. This is a way to kind of understand what the levers are here. The other piece that's here, then I reflected more or less identically in all 3, is that we need to demolish the building in order to build the new building. So in all cases, I'm essentially assuming that there's an early bid package. You can see the demo line in each version. There's an early bid package that allows the demolition to occur either in the last quarter of 2024 or the first quarter of 2025. And then that enables the construction to start right on its heels. And then the piece that's kind of floating between all those other things is the design period. And, we shouldn't think of this as the designers sort of filling in the gap. There's a whole, other conversation about how long they need. But I will say that in general, you want to give them enough time to make really good construction documents, because the better the documents, the tighter the bids will be and the less changes or increased costs you will have during construction. So I'm not here to kind of recommend any of these. I just kind of wanted to lay out how I think about it so that you could understand what some of the choices are that we'll have in the future. So I'm going to stop there and ask if people have questions.
The other thing I want to quickly mention is that, and this is how I interpreted the meeting. We met with the MSBA a couple, 2 weeks ago to help us, for them to give us some advice on this presentation. And they were curious about when we're thinking about doing a local vote for that first section, the yellow section.
Yellow.
Do we think we're going to get it in in the spring, or do we think we're going to be waiting for till the fall? And so I also did want folks to talk about when they think a good time to go to city council for the full ask would be.
Well, Mayor, you
I
have,
mean,
you have
I'll
an
speak
opinion
up
about
on
this.
that if you want.
And I know Aaron has an opinion about it.
Yeah, so I just for a few reasons think that we should try to advocate for it to get done in the spring. I think it increases our chances of attempting to be ready for the fall of 26. I think the good thing is we'll have our structure in place long before that. So if we can't start school there the fall of 2026, I don't think it will, critically impact the district because we'll already have reorganized, right?
Yeah.
But for the sake of the project, expediting if at all possible. And then I just think like based on our city, it's better to have the vote when it's not election season. So, I think it's better to have it in the spring than in the fall. But that's just my 2 cents. I know Mayor had a different opinion than mine, based on, having more finance reports ready for city council. But yeah.
And I think, yeah, so Aaron's raises great valid points. I just brought up, having more time to get more updated revenues, and feeling a lot more confident coming in front of them and securing yes votes by everybody. But to her point, well taken, that it is election time. That can be good. It can be, I mean, if everything goes as planned and we go forward the council during that time with the plan and how we're going to fund it, it can lean in our favor during election time, but there's no telling. So whatever you guys decide, I'm fine with.
I think more importantly than election time, though, is the potential 3 to 4 month impact on moving the process forward, right? So if it's ultimately our goal to have this, to strive to have the school open for fall of 26, then having the vote in May, June versus September, October significantly impacts our timeline. So that's something that I think we need to take into consideration when discussing it further.
So anybody else want to chime in on that issue? This is, believe me, this is not the first time we will talk about this. I mean, the last time we will talk about it.
I think I'm struggling with, I think one of the things I'm struggling with here is that in all 3 of these options, we get into, oh, okay, never mind. I got it now. I was confusing the quarter 1 and 2, 26 with fall of 26.
Yeah,
So
I have a
confusing
hard time looking at the quarter schedules, but it's the only way I could show you the whole
Yeah.
thing kind of on a page. So
You want to comment?
Yeah, Aaron,
Mr. Collmore would like to comment.
Go ahead, Mr. Collmore.
yeah, Margaret, thank you for coming back. We really appreciate it very, very much.
I'm so glad to be back.
It's been wonderful working with you. The question I have is, when can we start meeting with you to start developing this plan?
Now, I'm on board. I have a contract to do this work, and you will not get rid of me until we know the outcome of whether we're moving forward.
Something I wonder about is if we wait until, what I get a little bit nervous about is if we wait until fall, like, and when I say fall, I mean like September, like not November, especially when you look in the pre-work at the like MSBA meeting schedule. I get worried if we wait until September, then do people say, well, we should really wait till November when our new officials are elected. And then in November, they're actually not on yet. And so then it's, let's wait till January. And then that's so late. And especially because, and because this happened to us about 2 years ago with stuff where then it ended up being pushed to January. And then I also worry about, Margaret explained this to me, I didn't realize it. The local vote can happen before the MSBA vote, But once the MSBA votes, we have 120 days to prove ourselves. So like, say they vote us in at the, say we're like, they vote us in at the end of June and we think we can get a vote by September. And then the 120 day, and then people are like, no, let's wait till November till the election. Oh, wait, then January. Well, then we're more than 120 days and then we missed our clock. So I guess that's why I get nervous about, I'm afraid waiting till September by some could interpret to like not actually happening till January. But I'm curious what other people think.
I think that's a really good point, Erin. And I don't think it's crazy to think it couldn't happen, because it could happen. That's completely reasonable. You just never know.
Well, she made an observation that happened before, so that means we should think around the box and see what other options we have, and if we can do it earlier than the time that we're supposed to do it, then I think it might work.
Any other thoughts about that?
I think Erin is spot on. But I also sympathize with the mayor's desire to have more information. Because like at the end of the day, the goal is to get a yes vote. It would be unfortunate if we couldn't do it by fall of 2026, but not more unfortunate than like this not happening at all. Like I want this to happen, right? Like I want this to happen whether it happens in 26 or 27. But if it doesn't happen this year, like it's likely we're probably not going to be in the pipeline for another core project with the MSBA for a very long time. So I think we really need to make sure that like that all those, despite the concerns that were brought up, I think they're valid concerns. But the one thing that that like failed the first time around was the funding piece. Even those that were for the project expressed not voting for the project because of the funding. So knowing that that's probably the most important piece of securing a yes vote, we need to make sure those all of that is aligned, and the city council has enough information to feel positively about voting yes for this. So that just puts a lot of, if we want to do it in the spring, I agree. I would love to have this done, but not if it means we're not ready to go to the city council with information that's going to secure a yes vote. Because if we got a no vote, like it's done.
So, how about that? Is this a decision we have to make now, Erin? Because my thing is.
But we need to come into next week with an idea of what we're thinking, and maybe you could talk about the nuances of it when we meet with them.
So we are working on that 5-year plan that should be ready by the end of the calendar year if everything goes as planned. Also, we'll have new revenue projections in lieu of setting the tax rate. I think at that time we'll know if spring or fall makes better sense. So say let's hold off and making a concrete decision until at least till the end of the calendar year when I get that, when we get that important information. And to your point about, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I think that's totally fine. That's why I was saying, like, this is the beginning of the discussion, not the end of it.
And this is a very important piece, because going back to the campaign for the override, a lot of folks, to what Mr. Soto had mentioned there, that were for this project that voted no. Even myself, I was the lead on the yes side, but I've always been open and transparent with folks that I spoke to and say, look, I'm biased. I know how Holyoke is. We need these schools for children, but this is a terrible funding plan. And I sympathized on that front wholeheartedly. On the no side, I understood why folks felt why some folks felt that way when it came to the funding part. So we got to be strategic. We have to be very proactive in how we navigate this, because the goal is to get yes votes from every counselor. And we want to be sure that we're putting together something that's well thought out and responsible.
Okay, so it's 7:31, and I have to deliver an apology. So here it is, the first time I'm having a chance to meet with you, and I do have a hard stop in about 20 minutes. And there's another piece that I wanted to talk about. So now we've talked about the overall picture of this, but I want to now drill down a little bit on the next step, which I think there are a lot of questions about, which is how we get a designer on board. So is everybody comfortable with pivoting to that? And just keeping this overview in mind, because we'll come back to it. It's going to come up as we do the designer procurement, because we're going to have to tell them something, which is probably going to be, we don't know yet when the vote will be, but the designers have to formulate their deliverables for the MSBA according to a schedule that meets your schedule for the local vote. So we'll be back to this issue fairly quickly, but we don't need to settle it tonight. Erin, can you bring up my slide and I'll just explain what's going on with the designer procurement?
Yes, hold on. Jackie, I'll need you to pick up on notes then again, because I can't share. Okay. Hold on, I have too many tabs.
No, I know, I hear you.
Okay.
There we go.
Do you see the proposed project schedule up? Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Okay, so next steps for the designer selection. So this designer selection process will look a little different. The city has made a commitment to the MSBA to try out this model school procurement. So the way this will work, and I did talk to the MSBA about this a little bit this week to make sure I was representing this accurately. The MSBA has identified 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 schools that could potentially be model schools. And a model school is a school that, because it is considered to be an example of really excellent planning and organization and efficiency, could potentially be considered for reuse on another site. And I know that the city has looked at this a little bit, but we now have to actually go through the formal process of looking at those as a committee and deciding how you want to move forward. So the way this will work is that the MSBA will provide me with a template, and I will send it out to the 8 firms that they've identified. And it will say, we are doing this project. We would like to find out if you're interested in proposing your model school, because this is like a portfolio of buildings the MSBA has created. Are you interested in making a proposal to use our school for this program? So the document will include the educational program, information about the site, and those designers, and there's actually 8 projects, 5 designers. So some designers have 2 projects in the program. So obviously the designers aren't going to say like, well, here, try both of these. They're probably going to say, we think this one's a better fit. Now, depending on how busy they are and depending on how good a fit they think it is, they may say, actually, no, we don't want to participate, or yes, we do. And so some subset of that group, so let's say there's 5 contenders, so maybe 3, 4 of them decide they will provide a proposal to you to look at it, and you will look at the proposal and have an interview.
Thank you.
In parallel, you'll have a chance to essentially ask Jones Whitsett to come and also make a presentation and do an interview as the designer of the prior project. So it's kind of like the MSBA is treating the Jones Witsit project as a model school because it was designed for this site. So the timeline for that, I'm hoping that we can get the templates, these letters out to the designers in late September, have interviews in mid to late October, and have this decision made by end of November, early December. I mean, it's a little bit fast, but I know you guys are eager to get started. The decision that this group needs to make, and again, not today, I'm sort of laying this out so you can think about it, is you can have the full committee participate in this process, or you can have a subcommittee. You can create a subcommittee. And that's the thing I think that's maybe worth talking about a little bit. Yes, September of this year.
Okay.
I think, so the work, you wouldn't really have anything to do until late September, when I will bring you my draft of the template and say, okay, committee, this is what I'm going to send out. Do you have any comments? Then we're in charge, Answer's in charge of sending it out, taking the stuff in, distributing it, scheduling an opportunity to sit down and look at it together, scheduling the interviews. The MSBA does not participate in this process. They're really leaving it up to you. And then coming to a decision and documenting the reasons for your decision. So that's the overview. I bet there are lots of questions about this one. No question.
So I can't raise my hand because I'm driving. So if it's okay if I go, or Aaron, feel free to tell me if you need to call on someone else first.
You go, Aaron.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Okay. So again, just my 2 cents. I like the idea of the committee as a whole participating in this process, mainly for the sake of communication. I feel like the more of us that are involved, the more of us can go out into the community and explain what's going on. The more of us can have one-on-one conversations with council if needed to, fill them in on what's going on. And I just think that it would be a more informed process, and we've been planning to need to start meeting more frequently anyway. So again, that's just my opinion. And, to Margaret's point, we don't need to make a decision on this tonight. But we would need to make a decision probably at our next meeting then if we see the work really starting. Did you say late September or early October? Because if we're thinking late September, then we would need to decide on this tonight, because currently we're meeting once a month. So we wouldn't meet again until the first Thursday of October.
So you are going to have to start meeting more frequently than once a month. I'm glad you brought that up. I would say you should be meeting bi-weekly at this point. And
okay.
But I do not believe you need to make this decision tonight. And it may be easier once people have seen what the template looks like and what we're asking. But I mean, I will say, I know nobody asked my opinion, but I do think it would be great for the whole committee to participate. It's such, in the selection of the designer, it's such a fabulous opportunity to think together about what you're looking for and to develop a sort of commonality about common language, there will be times during this process that you will say, someone will say, remember we talked about this when we were doing the designer selection, right? It's an opportunity to build your strength as a committee together. And I know you've done a lot of other work in the last few months, but that is another good reason to do it.
So Aaron, at the end of this meeting, then we should probably discuss a second September meeting.
Yeah, maybe instead of bi-weekly, maybe like the first and third Thursdays in September. And then if there's a fifth Thursday, that's just off.
Yeah, sorry, did I say bi-weekly? I meant bi-monthly.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
basically we're talking 2 times a month.
Yeah. So I would agree with the third Thursday. I don't know if you feel it's something that we need to survey the committee to make sure that it works for most people, but I feel like, you know, we keep mentioning that, you know, soon we're gonna definitely go to 2 a month. So I think first and third makes a lot of sense. You know, if the rest of the committee would like to comment on it, and then we could put it to a motion if necessary.
So your meeting, is it typically on Thursday? So it would be the 22nd, is that right, Erin?
Well,
Or 15th?
no, it'd be the 15th. This is, well, luckily, I mean, this month is a 5 Thursday month, so if we needed to give you a little bit more time, I think most of us could meet on September 22nd. Superintendent is not available that evening, but I'm up to date.
I would lean towards the 22nd, because based on my conversation with the MSBA, the person who is leading this process in their office is out for a couple of weeks, and I will not have a chance to meet with them until the 16th. So if I can have sat down and met with them, and I can bring you the draft template on the 22nd, I think that we would be kind of further. It's probably worth waiting the extra week.
Okay, so maybe we can just make a decision on the next September meeting, and then at that meeting, we can further discuss our regular schedule moving forward.
Works for me.
I could survey people ahead of time, so we're bringing that data to the meeting.
Yeah, Erin, that would be helpful. All right, so I don't think we need to take a vote on it or anything unless we feel it's necessary. If anybody has any, you know, concerns about September 22nd, please raise them.
I don't have a concern, but I'm wondering, I put in the chat, so if we meet by 2 times a month, are we still meeting in our subgroups, or should we meet in our subgroups as needed? For example, we're academics and extracurriculars, and we're kind of at a standstill right now. And that would mean, you know, that's just a lot of meetings a month. And I know this is a really important project, but I will have to, you know, clear some schedule to ensure that all of that happens if that's what we're asking.
Erin, are you muted?
I was gonna say, I don't know if you guys are looking for me to answer that. I would feel more comfortable if somebody else answered that question.
Yeah, I would just say that if there's things that like for academics specifically that you need, I would say as needed, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
I think as we get further along in the project,
yeah,
even though we're meeting bi-weekly, you may have to schedule some academic subcommittee meetings if there's things that like we need to explore and dive into deeper around curriculum and extracurricular activities.
Jackie, I think for your subcommittee, the really intense period is going to be January and February. And the reason I say that is that at that point, we will have the designer on board, and the designer will be trying to really understand whether it's a model school or Jones West, that they will be trying to understand your program and to fit the proposed building. Even if it's shown the Witset, there are going to be changes to the original plan. So that period, like they've gotten started and they're kind of scrambling to get to the end of schematic design, they will need your help and input then.
okay. And I feel like that there will be hot spots of time for each of the subcommittees.
Yeah.
But that sounds good.
Okay.
We will meet as needed when we have decisions to be made or data to look at or. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And to second that point, Jackie, I think we've said for the regular meetings too, there may be hot points in time too. So, you know, if we find 1 month that we don't need the second meeting, then of course we'll adjust accordingly. Like if there's a lull in action at some point in time for some reason.
Okay.
I'll send out the calendar invite for September 22nd then.
Margaret, I have a question. This is Whitney,
Yeah.
or a couple of them. In regards to this, basically the solicitation or the interview or the qualifications for the model schools architect, including Jones Whitsitt. Will there be a site visit prior to the submittal of their proposals?
Oh, I think there has to be, yeah.
Okay, good. Do you know if Jones Whitsitt will also be constrained with the reimbursement cap of 4.5%, as will be the other model school architectural firms, subject to renegotiation? But does Joan Whitsitt fall under that as well?
I think the answer is no, but I need to confirm that, Whitney.
Okay. And we also would like to illustrate the fact that Hoyoke uniquely is under a gas moratorium, and therefore any of the mechanical contrivances inside the facility will not be supported by fossil fuels.
Yeah, I think that's a huge issue. For those firms who look at this and see that their building systems are not a match for this, that may be a reason for the models, some of the model school applicants to not apply, because it means they have to kind of completely redo that piece. And depending how they're delivering heating and cooling in the buildings, it could be a big design impact.
Yeah, that and the topography are huge.
And the topography, totally agreed.
Thank you.
All right, Aaron, do we want to move on to working group updates?
Hey guys, I gotta sign off. I gotta get in my shuttle to the airport. Thanks for running the meeting for me, and I will check in soon.
Hi, Aaron, safe flight.
Happy vacation. And I'm gonna, on Aaron's heels, I'm gonna sign off and ask if Bob can stick around and hear what I'm gonna miss, and maybe we could catch up tomorrow morning. So thank you all. Looking forward to seeing you in person very soon.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, Margaret.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All
Did
right,
any
anything
working
from-
groups want to share out updates from them? I'm from the, oh. Jackie, you raised your hand, you go.
My dog is barking. We have not met. Academics and extracurriculars has no new updates.
Great, I'll go next. Communications hasn't met, though I did email folks to see if they wanted to meet in September or not. That's from 3 days ago, so if people could respond, that would be great. I will say that the HPS communications team has been doing a lot of outreach around rezoning, of which the middle school building is a project is a part of it. In the agenda, I've linked the flyer for our community outreach sessions that are happening about rezoning in September and October. And I would strongly encourage you to attend one of them, and also please encourage people in your networks to attend too. We want people to be upfront and present at these meetings rather than come November, December, January, feel like they didn't know about it or didn't have a chance for voice. I will also just send a reminder email to you on next Wednesday, in case you're just too much looking forward to Labor Day weekend right now to do anything about it. I'll remind you next Wednesday, please. Thank you. Bill, I know that Mark Lubold he's on building design. He's the building design lead. I don't know if anyone else from that group wanted to meet, but he has football commitments tonight, and he said he'd make up the work afterwards. Was there I'm assuming there wasn't a building design meeting, but
That's correct.
okay, thanks, Whitney. And then finance, David, any updates there?
No, we haven't met since the last time that I discussed it. But if I could make a couple comments going back to Joshua's presentation. I mean, I like that idea of the
We have a meeting.
capital statement.
Second.
Oh.
Our committee.
I heard somebody else going there, but
Until after the 20th.
I like the idea of the capital stabilization account, But I think as Joshua pointed out, that's not going to make much of a dent in a big, major project like this, but it might help, with smaller things, police cars and so forth. It would cut down on interest costs. So in a holistic way, that might count. And on the revenue side, I'm looking forward to this 5-year plan. I think one of the most important things we want to think about when you look at our revenue sources. Of course, state aid is the biggest, but very close to that is our tax levy, especially on residential properties. So we want to look at trends on the valuation. So valuations, likely to go down over that course of time, how that's going to impact our overall revenue picture.
Yeah, and what's neat about that tool, the forecasting tool, is it's you can play with it, right? You can change figures. Like, let's say you anticipate debt rolling off 2 years from now, but also 2 years from now, you're expecting a 5% insurance increase, a health insurance increase. There's those uncontrollable items. There's health insurance and retirement. So you could say, all right, we're going to expect a 5-year 5% health insurance increase, but these debts are going to roll off. And then it's like the formulas in the budget document, communicate with each other, and it produces what your anticipated budget can look like if those assumptions were made. That's what's neat about that tool. So we can make all sorts of different assumptions to allow for us to make a comfortable decision. But again, they're all assumptions. Like I said, circumstances change all the time. So we just gotta keep our finger on the pulse as much as possible on that front. But thank you, David. Were there any other committee updates?
I forgot one more thing from communications. We did send a letter to the city councilors this week with an update on rezoning, and that's linked in the agenda for you too. So we are keeping them updated and encouraging them to attend the rezoning meetings as well.
Just at our next meeting, I think I want us to revisit our matrix. Folks that are on this committee, I think it's just healthy for us to be sure, because there has been some changes here and there, to just revisit that and make sure that that we have a balance and equity and representation in this group. And if there is another person or two we want to bring on, or maybe not, maybe things are okay. I just think it'll probably be healthy for all of us to revisit that, to maintain our commitment on to be intentional on representation on this body, as well as the school district's call for Juntos Podemos. So together we can. So we'll add that in the next agenda for the next meeting at the very beginning. Just quickly skim through it, look at our makeup, and see if there's anything that the body wants to do as far as recruitment, if we need it, maybe not, and so forth. So. That's it. I don't got anything else, Aaron. Is there? I don't have the agenda in front of me. Do we have anything else?
Could we approve the meeting minutes?
Yeah, sorry.
Do we have a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
Motion made.
Motion made by Superintendent Soto. Second. Did somebody second it? Who was that?
That seconded.
Great. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any opposed? Okay. Anything else on the agenda, Anthony? Aaron? No updates, nothing that anybody wants to say?
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Motion to adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Bye all. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.